Welcome to this episode of Talking Transformation, an Australian Transformation and Turnaround Association initiative. We hope you enjoy the varied conversations and experiences shared by our industry transformation and turnaround leaders. If you'd like to know more about AusTTA, you can visit our website at austatta.org. I'm the series host, Jackie O'Dowd. Welcome to this episode of the AusTTA Talking Transformation series. We've got some really interesting sessions planned for the next couple of weeks. In today's session, I'm talking to Bernie Kelly. Bernie is the chair of AusTTA. He's also an advisor and facilitator in all things change leadership. And he's also the author of Traction and the 4 Practices of Change Fit Leadership. So let's start talking transformation. Welcome, Bernie.
Welcome, Jackie. Been looking forward to this conversation and kicking off of your excellent initiative.
Yeah, well, I think it's a value add for members. It gives everybody an opportunity to talk to different people, experience different things and learn from different people. So I'm
Absolutely
quite excited about what we've got coming up and we've got planned in the next couple of weeks.
Yep, same here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your role in AusTTA. You're the head of this organisation. You're the chair. So tell us what that entails.
So we have a big purpose, as you know, Jackie, with enabling transformative impact to shape a better world is the words that we've all agreed on. And it's just, it is by design a massive purpose. Probably it's definitely a stretch from where we are now, and really there's a big gap to sort of step up and fill that. So along with yourself and many others, we're all sort of getting into to contribute to make that reality. I think there is such a massive gap in just the networks. There's so many great associations that are out there doing their own particular thing, but really getting the leadership of those together and getting a different momentum going, I guess, is what we're all focused on in the AusTTA leadership area.
And it's got quite a diverse membership too, hasn't it? Because as we've talked about previously, transformation can be many things to many people, and it involves so many people.
Yeah, that actually has been one of the things that really attracted me to the association in particular. I think there is so many excellent professional bodies that are for a specialty. There are so many sort of niche sort of groups, but really, yeah, our membership is so diverse. I mean, there's company directors, there's executives of all different functions, and there's really, even within the transformation professionals, there's internal people, there's external people, there's people that have got a functional strength or spike in technology and digital, and others that are way more in the sort of change and HR sort of angle. There's others that are that have actually been in the game a long time. There's others that have been in the game a short time. So it is quite a diverse membership, but I think that actually is part of the magic.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing, because when an organisation's doing a transformation, it's not transforming just in parts. You know, it's transforming typically as a whole. And so it takes many players, many capabilities to pull that together. So I think AusTTA is something that really can appeal to just about anybody in any organisation that's going through some sort of change or transformation.
So talking with members and a lot of other people of our sort of type in other parts of the globe, I think a lot of people that are wanting to have an impact in the world get to a level of seniority in their function or their discipline, and they see the need to be connecting dots. And that if anything, that probably is the common feature of a lot of our members, that people sort of see that, hey, I know a lot about this, but there's always more that I don't know about. And how do I respect other colleagues and other players and learn from that, as you're sort of saying, that bigger holistic view.
It is a holistic view, but I think we can, nobody has all the answers ever. I don't know of anybody who's got all the answers.
I love that sort of saying about, actually, the more I know that I don't know, which I think is so true, that as your circle of knowledge gets bigger, the sort of your realization about how much you don't know. And that actually is one of the great things about our community. I think that we've got, if you look across our community, there's already so many people that are absolute leaders in their field, but they're actually also very humble and wanting to share and learn more with other angles, which I think is one of the really great things to be a part of.
And I think that's the great thing, the opportunity, A, to collaborate,
Yep.
B, to share, because I'm a great believer that knowledge is made to be shared.
Yes.
And when we're doing transformation, there's lots of learnings, there's lots of failures, there's lots of successes. Some things work better than others. We all agree that it takes a village to raise a child. When you're transforming the organization, we need good systems, we need good processes, we need good strategies, we need great people and their thinking. So it's knitting those things together in just the right way and at the right time. So I think there's some interesting things.
It is, and it's interesting. I sort of say this with other executives, but I really think this in our transformation field in particular, is that what worked for you and I maybe in a great case study 10 years ago may not, the situation is so much evolving that actually, even if you want to be at the forefront, definitely if you want to be at the forefront of this work, you need to keep retuning into the new situation and being willing to unlearn things that were really useful maybe 10 years ago, but not necessarily the intention for that particular organization in that particular situation.
Yeah. And I think, like when we talk about case studies, they're typically planned transformations or changes or turnarounds, whatever the emphasis of it was.
Quite often they're written in retrospect too, right? Like,
that's right. And they get glossed over for the results.
And we've all done that.
We have. And, it's a consulting thing, isn't it? But my interest now is in the transformation and the changes that organizations, particularly in the last 12 to 18 months since the pandemic, forced change on organizations. So they didn't really have time to plan. 1 minute it was there, 1 minute it's not. 1 minute you've got an office full of people, the next minute everybody's working at home. So the great thing is the technology platforms have allowed us to all do that. And so business can continue, but it's also got, I think, it's introduced a number of different challenges and interesting challenges.
Yep.
How we all work together, how you get collaboration happening remotely. It's different to working on a screen, to being in a room. The human dynamics change. And then we don't have the grand plan. We don't have the roadmap in all cases to say we need to go here, there, and everywhere. So a lot of it is a daily evolving of how we're getting from here to there, making things better.
I totally agree. I quite often talk with executive teams about how in the transformation space, I think there is that sort of responsive muscle, so to speak, and actually you do need to be building that responsive muscle, particularly at the moment. But there also is the intentional muscle, and I think that actually one of the things that I really want to be encouraging, I guess, as we move through this protracted period, is that we're building both muscles. We're going to have to be responsive to things that we've never seen before and keep doing that, but also that we take a bit of time to be a bit reflective and a bit more, that we still keep that visionary, intentional transformation muscle going as well.
Yeah. I think one of the big things for me is to get an understanding of where the organization is at any point in time, because otherwise you don't know what you're flexing those muscles for.
I was so delighted to see we've got Dave Snowden on our agenda with this, because I think that he's the Kelly1 model. If I think back over the last 30 years, I'm along with probably everyone else been guilty of not necessarily matching the solution with the exact situation you were in. And I think that the framework of the Kelly1 does actually help have a clearer conversation about, which situation, which context are we in, and therefore, we need to behave and think and use quite different models. So that's going to be a great conversation.
I think it will. In fact, I think we've got a good couple of conversations coming up.
Absolutely.
The one with Hakan Runner from Vought Explore. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the one with Dave Snowden as well. So hopefully people get some value out of those conversations, because these people have got huge brains.
Yes.
They've been through a lot. They've experienced a lot. And I think one of the great things that we can explore is just the introduction of complication in everything we do, the complexity in what we do, and most of all, constraints. And that's what I like about Dave. He often talks about constraints.
Yep. It is fascinating. The constraints are good though as well. Constraints can be such a powerful tool. I think some of our best innovations come in times when we enforce constraints on ourselves. But but also, as you sort of alluded to there, I can even think about myself, how I add complications to my life, that extra workload and complications that you go, well, really, it is fascinating. Just continually raising that awareness for ourselves, and that actually from the upside of this transformation conversation, I think that's one of the things that we really want to be forcing. I think the responsive muscle is totally necessary, but there's also a real developmental upside that we like to talk about in our circles.
And there is that's very much the case in the transformation space, but in the turnaround space, like we said, it's a different muscle. Quite often the emphasis is different. You already have a lot of constraints.
There's a lot of constraints
to work through. There's also an awful lot of chaos happening that you need to solve as you're going down that path to get cash flow back on track, make sure you retain the people, the brand, the reputation, all of those things that happen, and make sure that the business is salvageable and can come out the other end of that turnaround rather than just either closing down or changing. So we've got two different spheres, haven't we, that we're playing in, but the actions and the initiatives that you take are not necessarily that different.
I don't know whether it's always interesting playing with words, isn't it? Because I'm not sure whether it's spheres or whether it's continuum. Because I think at the collapsing or that in threat of collapsing end of organisations, it's sort of, as you said, there's a lot more constraints. There's a lot of energy that's already sapped out of the community, the workforce. But it is the same. It's the same continuum. And I think one of the great things about having transformation and turnaround still in our scope is that that there is a bit of optimism there to actually go, well, if we do the right nurturing back here, we're not just that it's not just a turnaround this year, that it actually hopefully becomes that they can move up the continuum of change, fitness, and being able to be a future thriving organisation too.
Yeah, and we just build that capability into whichever thing that we're doing. I mean, I've found it interesting because I do a lot of work in the project remediation space.
Yep.
And so the money is all spent. Like you said, the energy is all spent, the enthusiasm's gone.
Yep.
And so the leadership at that point becomes even more critical, because you've got to re-engage people. And there's nothing worse when another advisor or another consultant comes in to bail out a project. It's just like, oh, here we go again. So, what are some of the traction things that you see in that case that you can bring into play?
Yeah, so I really think in that case, because I think it moves through that continuum, but in that case, just the empathy. I look back at over the years, and sometimes I can see misses in my own empathy that I wasn't actually really, and I think the empathy is where you meet people where they are, and you actually can sort of bring them along the journey. I mean, it's very easy when the people who are coming in from the outside to actually cause more harm in the people part. And they might correct the books in the short term, but they can cause harm in the people part. So actually having enough empathy that you're that they're actually, those people build out of that experience is really key, I think, to key to have front of mind and be sort of really sort of conscious of.
Yeah. I always like to look at how have you ended up here? What did you do? What was done? What were the conditions?
Or what did you avoid as well?
Yeah, exactly. And what's the context of all of this? Put it in context. And I think if you can put it in context and you can get the learning out of it as well as the reshaping out of it, then everybody benefits.
Yep.
And I think there is a particular style for successful remediation.
Yep.
They can be tough, but they can also, I hate to say it, they can also be good fun. Like if I can't get some fun out of a remediation, it's too hard.
Well, I think that, and the ones that you're most proud of, I've found over the years, are where people lift as well. Like, you know, that they go off and they're way better having worked with you in that period. That is good fun. It's also quite fulfilling when you can sort of see that over the years. You know, those people might have had a hard patch, but they've lifted overall.
There's nothing better than seeing a team that was, I'd say, disenfranchised because something had failed. They'd lost their mojo. To see them get that mojo back when they see that things are starting to come back, you know, we've got control of this, and you get the engagement. I think that's fascinating. But
there's another
and it falls between transformation and turnaround. You're turning something around, but you're doing it for a purpose to make it better.
There's a fascinating spot just further up that continuum, I think, where the leadership are coasting, where they've actually, you know, they've got a reasonable business model and that's been good for a long time, and they're probably, you know, they've got people that are happy to follow the existing industry operating model because it keeps spinning out cash. So, you know, happy days. Yeah. And I think that group, or a particular group, I'm leaning into a bit at the minute, because I think that there's so much external movement in a lot of the sectors where people have been coasting for the last decade, and that group they're different, because they actually need to, rather than that sort of real empathy thing, they actually need a little bit of space created in their schedule to actually reflect. And I'd like to share homework with them about, are you aware that these people are doing that, and just sort of share with things that are going on around the edges, because they need to be, they need to have some space to reimagine themselves and to reinvent for the next decade. So it's an interesting, again, going along that continuum, just how, you know, the different emphasis that we can add value through.
Yeah. Like you said, when an organization's been successful, it's got lots of cash, which can sometimes cover a myriad of sins.
There's a lot of lack of discipline that you're allowed to have when you've got lots of cash.
But there's also in lots of cases, there's a lack of inertia, because the team's just, we don't need to do it right now. P&L's great. Balance sheet is great. People are reasonably happy.
Yeah.
So why should we change?
I've been Jim Collins is one of the references I think is great for that whole sort of building momentum of you know, good to great and all those sort of things. And in one of his other books, he's actually talks about like the steps, or the steps on the pathway to decline. And one of them he actually calls out early is when, because, and the thing I think is great about this is it's before we're self-aware, we're actually feeling so good about ourselves that we're not looking at all the fundamentals anymore. Yeah. And that actually, he actually has that as the first phase of an organization in decline, is when you actually are so strong that you actually, you know, you excuse yourself of some of the fundamental rigor.
Yeah, I think, and you know, the one thing that I always think, if the organization is going to transform, it never stops.
Yep.
It is a journey. So yeah, you can celebrate the successes and you can say, got a great balance sheet, got a great P&L, got money in the bank. But unless you're doing good stuff with it, you're looking at how those resources are consistently applied. It's, you know, it's going to be problematic. There's going to be some challenge you're going to face in the future. So a bit of gentle prodding doesn't help.
So the interesting thing, using that exact analogy, like we've just been talking organisations, but you know, we're an individual member organisation, and I think the same happens with people who are in the sort of leading edge of, you know, executive roles and transformation professionals. That actually, if I'm 1 year from retirement, this conversation may not apply to me, right? But anyone who's got a decade or 2 decades of career left, you might be sitting strong at the minute, but are you actually preparing fitness for that next phase? And I think that actually is one of the proactive messages that I love about talking about in our community, is how are you making sure that you're fit for that next that next strategic phase that's going on in the industry that you're associated with. And for transformation professionals, that means, we've got to keep getting more digital. We've got to keep getting deeper into ourselves as individuals. We've got to keep getting better at our networking and learning about the world. There's a whole heap of things to keep us fit for that next phase.
I think one of the key things is the sharing of knowledge. Like you talked about where people are in their careers. Like if somebody's just starting, got all that enthusiasm, thirst for learning, all of that sort of stuff. And then you've got people at the end of their careers that think, I've only got a year or two to go, so what does it really matter? I think it's really important to bring those two groups together just from a knowledge perspective. I did some work many years ago for an organisation that had just that issue where they brought in a whole team of younger MBAs, and the older engineers were getting close to retirement. Super was really good, and they decided that they were going to leave early. And, the organisation said, oh, my God, our average age is 50 plus.
Yes.
So what do we do with that? So they had a very, very forward-thinking CEO. And she said, I need to make sure I capture this knowledge. How do we do it?
Yes.
So we actually said, let's do some knowledge sharing. Let's look at the platforms here for knowledge sharing, but also how you transform that knowledge over time and how you keep the older knowledge, that this is how we built this 30 years ago type stuff. How do we bring that engaged? So we implemented an alumni for people who had left the organisation, who would come back for a lunch or morning tea or drinks after work to share that knowledge. And when the younger ones were pushing new initiatives, new projects, the older guys would say, just be sure you've got this bit covered. And my God, that stuff's invaluable.
Yeah, no, I that is really, and I think even people not quite as sort of senior in your career, even coming back, that whole pressure testing of strategy or strategy hardening or failure analysis, they would call it in engineering, but it's that same sort of concept in strategy. There's so many strategies that haven't got the rigor, and I think that actually one of the real builds for people out of our community is actually how do we help others ensure that we're actually making rigorous strategies, that we are calling out those risks before so many risks are predictable. That's one of my realizations being in the game for 30 years. You go like, oh, wait, stop. There's all these risks that I know are going to happen. Let's talk about them now. And the great thing is there's academic research that backs all of that up. There's heaps of experience that backs it up. These will be risks along the road. Let's not miss them in the preparation and the building phase.
And let's have a thought process for if they do eventuate. How do we minimize them or mitigate them completely?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of stuff happening in risk now. Everybody's facing it. My God, we've all had to contend with a lot of risk over the last 12 months, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. And I think, back to that sort of topic about, who is a transformation player. I mean, it's interesting that even in that little bit of a conversation we said there, when you could come from the strategy function, the risk function, the finance function, the operational function, and all of those executives would actually be, benefiting out of this sort of more cross-functional sort of whole of organisation transformation thinking.
Well, you need to bring everybody along on the journey, don't you? Because from an organisational perspective, it's not going to just transform one part of its business. It can transform its strategy, but if it doesn't have supporting structures, it's got a problem. It needs to change the way it does things, its ways of being and doing. It's got to bring people along on the journey. Otherwise, what are we all doing?
Yep.
And it needs to make sure it's got the right data and information to support all of that. So each of those typically are managed by multiple functions, multiple teams within a business, all headed by different people, different teams.
Different strengths, different natures. Yeah.
And those teams now are becoming more and more cross-functional. So you're going to get somebody from supply chain working with somebody from IT because of the digitization component. Yes. You're going to get legal teams and internal counsels, if you're large enough to have them, working with contract managers and business development managers, all of those. So this cross-pollination of teams, it doesn't matter whether you're a large organization or a small one, whether you're 3 people or 3,000 people. It is a people game.
It is a people game. And I think also
everything else is just a tool.
But also in that conversation, just how many, it's a people game, but also how many perspectives are out there. And I think one of the exciting things about this period is, like, we've never been in a period where we've had more data, and we're going to have, that's doubling at a rapid rate, globally, the data we have, but also because we're so more connected than ever, we're actually exposed to more perspectives, and our businesses are exposed to more perspectives than they've ever been. And what I mean by that, I guess, is that, really, well, there's nearly 8 billion people connected to the internet nowadays. So there's all of those different views of the world. And then if you think about your particular market, where once you would never have heard of all the different consumers and stakeholders, they've got access to make their view of the world totally out there. So there's a wealth of knowledge and it's a wealth of opportunity and a wealth of risk, I think, that is actually coming our way, and this transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary piece that we're sort of, right in the middle of with our sort of transformation agenda is so critical.
Yeah, and touching on the data one for the WA chapter next month on the 10th of next month, I think it is. We've actually got a live event, COVID and everything else permitting, which is just on data and the use of data in transformation, because the complexity around that now, the shaping of it, the owning of it, the repurposing of it, aggregation, all of those things from a legal aspect to make sure that you understand what's yours and how you can use it, and what's not yours and and the rules around that, against getting just great understanding and getting the insight from it. Like you said, we have so much of it now. We generate terabytes, I think, in every business every day.
Yep.
What do we do with it? How does that data help us better understand and shape what we're doing? And what insight has it given us? What do we do well? What do we not do? And just the basic question of what's actually happening here.
Yeah. Now, that's a good, I'm so much into that conversation. I think 20 years ago, you were probably a good executive team if you had one power data enthusiast, typically the CFO, right? Where nowadays, if you're actually got an executive team and the table is not surrounded by data enthusiasts, you're just missing, you've got blind spots everywhere. So actually, it's an interesting era, because I think
it is.
And all of us look at data in different ways, but every function has just so much untapped potential going around the different perspectives that if we're only looking through the one lens, we're not really at the high performing end anymore.
No, but there's a danger too to data, isn't there?
Tell me about what you're thinking there.
Well, we have it. We're using all these analytical tools, Power BI, Excel, data warehouses. We're pulling all of this data together. Data's historical. It's stuff that has happened that we can't change. It's given us a view. And if we're not really careful, we can become insular. We're inward focus looking the whole time based on stuff that we know. But we've got to have the antenna running as well to say, is that data real? Is it right? Is it in context? Has it got bias within it? Have we lost the granularity of it? Is it going to help us make a better decision? And at the end of the day, what do people feel and think about the data?
Yeah. So something
I go into so many organizations and their data is absolutely rubbish.
Absolutely.
The quality is awful. The timing of it is awful. And you think, with just some minor tweaks, they could be doing things in such a better, different way.
So something I think will really resonate with you on that, Jackie, is, Cal Newport, like, he's the author of Deep Work. Anyway, he actually has this phrase about the metric black hole. And actually, and the fascinating thing about the metric black hole is that the really good insights are actually quite often really hard to get good data out of, because for all those reasons you said, the data's not clean. It's something we've never recorded before. Our current dashboard isn't designed like that. Our system doesn't extract that information at that time. So actually getting some of the real insights that you want as a board or an executive are actually in the metric black hole, is his phrase. And I think it is so true when you think about how many times you've been on a job where people have a strategy which needs new measures, and those new measures take about 2 years to pull out of the system.
But it's a fascinating space, and it's one of what I call 7 elements that an organisation needs to bring together to make it work. But I think we've got the opportunity now to do some amazing things, to get some really good conversations happening amongst our membership and those that are interested in membership of AusTTA.
Yep, it's interesting. So one of the things
all of that.
One of the things which is interesting with the trying to get the wording of this right. So a lot of our members have come from different organisations that actually use the phrase like a body of knowledge, there was an internal debate about the fact that the body of knowledge it just seems too fixed, like everything is already sorted, which doesn't really sort of match our scope and our situation. So we've been more sort of talking about like the AusTTA nexus, which has more of a cross in the middle, where it actually is respecting past experience, respecting past theories that are really useful, but also actually having a future orientation as well about creating models that are going to be useful, and co-creating experiences that are useful, and building things that aren't made yet, which I think is a real sort of a differentiator of the conversations we're having. I think that we're having, gathering so much wisdom from the past, but also acknowledging that we need to be doing that future orientation work within our sort of association and our networks of other associations and groups.
Yeah. So we're on our last couple of minutes now, if we're not going to just chew up all of our cloud storage. So how do you see that AusTTA would help individuals and organisations to smooth the path to a better business, better way of being and doing?
Yep.
Is it through the nexus?
Yeah, I think that actually across the nexus, so the nexus does sort of give us a lot of those angles, right? So even people like you and I that have been in the game a long time, there's still things we can learn when people give us proven models that are useful. We all love listening to case studies, behind the scenes, real case studies, because that's where the warts and all, sort of lessons are. But there's so much still to be built, and I think that actually is where that sort of future orientation and making sure that we're sort of similar to the Dave Snowden sort of Cynefin model, but other things, and also weak signals, that we're actually building models that sort of take on that, and sort of the theory around that. That also that there's even in our own purpose statement of transformative impact, there's so much fleshing out of that to be built. So having the past orientation, learning from the past, but also a builder contributing and learning into the future is also, I think, part of, totally applies to individuals if they're going to be in this game and remain current. And it's also organisations. I think, we've touched on it now, they're going to either not be racing ahead at the pace that others are, or they're going to miss risks that they could have mitigated. And I think what I'd like to call out, I guess, when I look at this next decade, have you heard of the Red Queen effect, Jackie?
No.
So in biology, or in sort of evolutionary biology, there's a whole sort of thing about the survival of the fittest. And one of the observations, I guess, is that when everyone's moving up, we're actually not going anywhere. So the Red Queen effect is actually out of Alice in Wonderland. That there's a scene in Alice in Wonderland where she's racing along with the Red Queen, and they're running as hard as they absolutely can, but they're going nowhere. And I think that actually a lot of people need to be aware of the fact that, when everyone has cloud capability, you've gone nowhere. When everyone steps up and has mobile devices. All these things are just the competitive, the world's moving up. You're not actually getting any fitter, even though it feels like a heap of work. And I think that actually we need to be a bit wiser about how do we do those fundamental things so we're not falling off, not going backwards, but also what are those sort of visionary or strategic things that are actually going to help us be competitive, help us be stepping ahead in our market, because not doing the fundamentals falls behind, but doing the fundamentals is keeping at the same spot at best.
It keeps you part of a status quo, aren't you? I always look at those things as just enablers.
Yeah.
But it's how you use them. The secret sauce is how you use them to grow whatever you're growing, to sustain whatever you're sustaining, to make resilient whatever you want to be more resilient. But I think the most important thing is how do those enablers, which everybody's got access to, build your differentiation. What makes you different? What makes you special? What makes you better value to something else or someone else? How do you use them just to build a better level of collaboration, contribution?
And that's where I guess that's what I call that intentional muscle of transformation. You need to be, if you're totally, we've got to do the responsive stuff. Totally, no debate at all. But also continuing to build that intentional muscle, asking those good questions is absolutely key. And I think that being a part of our community, always coming from that angle, is going to encourage more of those better quality questions.
Well, asking questions is a thing that we're going to get into, obviously, over the next couple of weeks for the series, for the video and for the podcast series. And I'm really looking forward to getting into some of those conversations and getting people actually coming forward and letting us know what they're looking for, because at the end of the day, this is an information provision. So, if members and people outside who are considering membership, if they've got questions, got things they want to know about, then I think it's important that they can come forward and we can have these talking transformation conversations.
I would also, before we run out of time, I'd like to grab the opportunity to call out to anyone who's having a listen to this podcast and actually believes that they can make a massive contribution to, transformative impact in shaping a better world and actually lifting the whole Australian conversation. Please do not be shy. Reach out to Jackie, myself, or anyone else on any of the other chapters. We are looking to work with others to actually, to really fulfill that purpose. And we need leaders. We need people who can really step into that space. And as we've talked about here, just so many different capability angles. So whatever your strength, Spike, is, please feel free to come and talk with us about how you could contribute and be a part of that team.
Yeah, we look forward to it. Hey. All right. Well, now we're out of time. So, Bernie, thank you. I've had some fun talking about transformation because I
Jackie.
Talk about that under wet concrete sometimes.
Yeah. We can leave. We can turn the record off and talk for another hour or so, couldn't we?
Well, we can. We can. So, just so everybody knows, we've got, like we said before, two really interesting conversations happening in the next couple of weeks. One with Hakon Runner, who is the CEO of VaultExplore, and Dave Snowden. So I'll hope you all tune into those because I'm sure they'll be absolutely fascinating.
They will be, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Bernie, thank you. It's been great having this conversation, the first series. Let's see how we go. And if people are interested in membership of AusTTA, please visit the AusTTA.org website. And there's information on there. Or as Bernie said, reach out to either the state presidents or committee members in each state or to Bernie or myself. So thanks, Bernie.
Thank you very much, Jackie.
Okay, talk soon.